A very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you all to this webinar series. This series has been designed by the Department of Physiology, AIIMS, Jodhpur, in collaboration with the Physiological Society of India. And this has been particularly intended for PG students who are in different phases of their research. Some might be planning for their topic, they might be searching for the topic, some might be in the phase of writing a thesis, and also some young faculty who might have to publish for their promotion. So, uh, when the PG students join the MD course, most of them have never been exposed to research methodology or any kind of research project. But when they enter the course, they are asked to select a topic for their thesis, to submit the plan within 6 months of their entry into the PG course. And most of the students at this stage have no idea whatsoever how to start with, and so they simply hunt for some published dissertations in the library and select some random titles. And in this webinar series, we have selected those topics which will walk them through the different phases of research and thesis writing. We will be presenting one webinar of 1 hour a day for 7 consecutive days, Monday through Sunday. And on Sunday, as they say that the best things are kept for last. So on Sunday, we will be giving you, besides the webinar, a link for the feedback form. And all the registered participants who will be completing the feedback form will be provided with e-certificates. Hope you enjoy the sessions and find them useful. So we start with the webinar on conceptualizing a study, research study. And I am Dr. Bharti Mehta, additional professor in the Department of Physiology, AIIMS, Jodhpur. This is the outline of my presentation. One slide each of types of research, need for research, life cycle of a research, and then we'll be talking about the finer criteria of a research idea, something about the research question and hypothesis. Finally, we will formulate the title of the study. And as a surprise element, we have got a self-assessment quiz for you, which we will be sharing in the end. And this will be having 5 MCQs, which will be for your self-assessment. So you can get the scores there and there. And you can assess your learning at that point of time. Let us talk about types of research. There could be no better times than Corona times to understand the types of research and needs of research. The research may be theoretical, wherein you are trying to define or to see the structure or function of some organism. And when this theoretical research is applied for the healthcare, maybe in the form of prevention, maybe in the form of treatment, it becomes applied research. The preventive research, as you know, is if you are trying to prevent some disease, which may be in the form of vaccine, and not only in the simplest form, it may be, you know, that hand washing and social distancing also are the measures, are the preventive measures, and someone have done some research on this and they have come out with these guidelines, right? So this is also preventive research. Therapeutic research, the whole world is struggling to find out the treatment for corona virus, COVID-19, and this will be therapeutic research where some therapy is given, some treatment is given. Exploratory research is this research which is done on some new organism just to find out what it is. And then in the process of exploration, you will go to different types of research, theoretical, applied, and so on. Translational research is the research when you do some research and then the government, you share the results with the government, and government takes serious efforts and forms some guidelines. In normal circumstances, this is somewhat delayed process because it take time to for the government to decide on these guidelines. But in Corona times, it is happening very fast. Every other day, you see different guidelines. Earlier, it was to keep the social distancing of 1 foot, and now it was, and later it was changed to 2 feet. So someone somewhere in the world might have done this research and found out that 1 foot distance is not enough. So the guidelines changed. So this is translational research. Need for research. Most important need for research are these first two things: to generate the evidence and clinical implications. Generate the evidence because the health professionals, that they practice evidence-based medicine. That means besides their own clinical skills, they also take into consideration the evidence that is there for the treatment purposes. And the evidence is in the form of research that has been done, and therefore the research has to be published. So the published research, if you do something and do not publish, it will go into vain. Because until and unless you do not share your results with the society, the community, nobody will come to know that you have done research. So to generate evidence is there, and there are certain types of study designs which generate greater evidence than some other ones. We will just see in a while. Clinical implications, of course, for all the kinds of preventive measures, for the therapeutic research, all the clinical implications, and even to diagnose something, these are all clinical implications of the research for which the research is done. Some of the researchers do research to earn their living, and some of the faculty, they need to publish for promotion because MCI has made it mandatory nowadays to have certain number of publications for their promotions, and for that they go for research. Some people have got a passion for research, but the number unfortunately is less. If I ask most of the PG students, why do you want to do research? I think 90% of them will answer because it is a part of the curriculum. For the MD, they have to do a thesis, they have to write a thesis, and therefore they will be doing the research. They are supposed to do the research. So my advice to them is that if it is the part of the curriculum, that means you must have that skill to do the research, and you do it wholeheartedly in the set protocol, so that it may generate some interest in you also, and you may start loving research. The key steps of a research process, or the lifestyle of the research, or the life cycle of a research, is first of all conception, wherein a basic idea that you have in your mind may be transformed into a research question. And this research question is formed by searching a lot of literature. And then when you formulate a research question, you have to select an appropriate study design. And that is very important. There are different types of study designs which will be answering your research question. And you have to select most appropriate study design which answers your research question. And once you select the study design and define all the tools and all the data and the material methods that you define, then you go for execution of your research, wherein you collect the data, and then comes the statistical analysis, the nightmare for most of us, when you use statistical tests for analyzing the whatever you have done, and finally you report it and publish it. So these are the key steps of a research process, and it should follow in this succession. Now, talking about study designs, there is a set protocol for study designs. You might have heard a number of names of number of study designs, such as cohort studies, case control studies, cross-sectional studies. RCTs are randomized control trials, and At the tip of, they form a pyramid, and at the tip of the pyramid you can see systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So these are the studies, these are the different types of studies which come into one umbrella, which are called quantitative studies. These have something in common. The protocol that is followed in these studies is rigid. Firstly, you define a research question and formulate a hypothesis, and then you take a sample size, and sample size should be adequate so that uh, it the results of that study can be extrapolated to the generalized population. And then you have data collection in the form of data, obviously will be in the form of words, in the form of numbers, sorry. And then some statistical tests will be applied to analyze that data, and ultimately that will be presented. So with this, you will test the hypothesis, whether the hypothesis that you made was correct or not. And these kind of studies, as you go above, these are different types of studies. At the tip of the study, at the tip of the pyramid, the systematic reviews and randomized controlled trials, these form the studies which generate the highest level of evidence. So if you find these studies on your on whatever you are looking for, these are those studies which generate highest amount of level of evidence. And these are the studies which are, though you will find most of the studies lying in these this level, but these generate comparatively lesser level of evidence. So these were quantitative studies. These are quantitative studies, and you will be discussing all these studies in a session of study designs, which will be presented by Dr. Pooja Ojha. Next, there is one more type of studies, which does not have place in this pyramid, and these are outside this pyramid. These studies are called qualitative studies. This up to this level are called observational or descriptive type of studies, and these are called interventional studies. Uh, Along with this, there is one more type of study which is called qualitative study, and as the name suggests, here we will not be talking about the quantity. We will be talking about quality, and this quality will not be in the form of numbers. This will be the data that you will obtain in these kind of studies will be in the form of words. And the population will be, sample size will be small, because you will be collecting the data in the form of interviews, and some people speak very much more. So the data that you obtain will be much more, and since this is not in numbers, the data is not in numbers, you cannot apply statistical tests to them. So no statistics will be applied in these qualitative studies, and it is a different kind of analysis which is called thematic analysis. And in these kind of studies, you might generate hypotheses. You do not test hypotheses in these kind of studies. Example maybe, say if you want to know perception of people in lockdown. Now the perception of people in lockdown, you can do quantitative studies in this also, wherein you can formulate some questionnaires, but in those questionnaires you might think of something like maybe your sleep was altered, how your sleep was altered, or how your mental status was altered, but you will be asking only those things which you think uh, might be disturbed during this time. But when you go for a qualitative study, this will be an open-ended question that you will be asking, and some people might come out with different type of problems which you might not have uh, even thought in the first place. Say, for example, if you go to Dharavi and do this kind of study, they will say that they were having a problem in sleeping in their residence itself, because normally people go out for work and only 2 people were there in the night, but now since because of the lockdown, 6 people were residing in one room, and that was something like that. Many of the people may have financial problems also. So different people will have different types of problems, and that will come out by qualitative studies. So this is the difference between the quantitative and qualitative studies. And sometimes the studies are mixed together. That means part of the study is quantitative and part of the study is qualitative. And these are called mixed method studies. So having said this, let us talk about finer criteria for a research idea. Now, finer I'm using here not as a word, but as an acronym, wherein F stands for feasible. Now, feasibility could be in the form of resources, it could be in the form of funds, time, expertise, and number of subjects, and many more. So first and foremost, you must think whether the idea that you have in your mind is doable or not. You must think of funds, whether the funds are available or not. The time is another thing that you must give due importance, because as for the PG students, when they enter the course, within 6 months they are asked to submit their protocol, and before 6 months of their exams, they are asked to submit their thesis. So effectively, they have got 2 years for not only getting the ethical clearance from the institute, to collecting data, analyzing it, writing, and getting the thesis printed and submitting. Besides this, they have to do all the other, much more work, like attending the classes, attending the practicals, and if there are some labs running in your department, like sleep lab or the autonomic function lab, then you have to give your you have to be there as well. And then besides this, you have to do all these things. And besides this, the seminars, the journal clubs, so a whole lot of things you have to do. So you know that these are the things you have to do, and you are supposed to do it. Besides this, you have to do thesis also. So this feasibility has to be kept in mind. Say, for example, if I want to do, I want to look for hazards of snowfall in Jodhpur. I cannot do this because it is never going to snow in Jodhpur. So this is not at all feasible. Again, funds also, we have to think of the funds also. We may plan a study in which we want to do MRI of, say, 100 patients. Who is going to pay for those tests that you're going to do? So you have to take this into consideration. The expertise is also to be taken into consideration. Sometimes if the labs are running in your own department, maybe neurophysiology lab or autonomic function lab or cognitive function lab. So my advice to you would be that you select a topic from those labs, which can be done on those labs, so that the patients may come to that lab and you are available in your own department most of the time. Otherwise, you may have to go to different departments. The machine or the device on which you are working may not be free at that point of time when you go there. So these things are to be kept in mind. Feasibility is very, very important. Now, I in finer stands for interesting. So the study that you might be doing should be of interest not only to others, but it should be of interest to you as well, so that if you do it, you are doing it wholeheartedly, and you might develop interest in research also. N stands for novel. So the study that you should be doing should be novel. Now, sometimes this is not possible. This becomes very difficult. So novelty does not mean only the new findings, but if you are adding something to existing literature, also adds to novelty. And sometimes, if you are selecting a different population, doing the same study but on a different population, also makes the study novel. Now, by using different population, I mean to say that some different where you really can justify that the study that you're doing on different population may differ from the existing one. Say, for example, if I have done PEFR determination on school children of Jodhpur district, and you say that I will be doing the same study on the people residing or the students residing in Jaipur district. This does not make add to any novelty. Why? Because Jaipur and Jodhpur are geographically alike. They are plain regions. And why do you expect that something, the PEFR or the peak expiratory flow rate will be different in children residing in Jaipur? But if I try to do the same study in people residing in maybe the hill stations, maybe Kullu or maybe in Uti or Shimla, so there I can give a justification because the people residing, the students who are residing in hilly areas where in the environment the PO2 is lesser than normal, than lesser than that in the plains, and they are acclimatized there, they have barrel shaped chests and they have high hemoglobin level. So the peak expiratory flow rate might be different there, and giving this justification, if you are doing this study in that population, that can add to the novelty in the study. Now, E stands for ethics, ethical. The study that you should do should be ethical. And we have a session on ethics tomorrow. Ethics is something which is largely overlooked by most of us and it is not given due importance. But I must tell you, it is extremely important to consider ethics not only at the time of planning but also at the time of writing and publishing your work. This is going to save you from a lot of malpractices and legal consequences. And R stands for relevant. The study should be relevant to the scientific knowledge, health policies, future research. So if you are searching your literature from PubMed and you are searching from the medical databases, this won't be a problem. But if I try to do a study, something like development of embroidery thread for application in stretchable fabric, this is not relevant at all to the health. This might be relevant to the health, to the textile industry, but not to the health industry. So the study that you do must be relevant. Now, what are the steps to formulate a research question? First and foremost, you select an idea that motivates you, and you have to look for the feasibility. So looking for the feasibility first of all, and once you think that the idea can be done, it is a doable job, then you find the keywords for this, and it is with these keywords you will search the literature. And you will come to know that literature search is very important. We have a session on this, which will be presented by Dr. Omlata Bhagat, and she will be talking mostly about the search in the PubMed and how to manage those references that you have retrieved from PubMed. So with that keywords, you will be retrieving the articles of your choice. And then with this literature search, you will particularly be looking for review articles. Now, review articles, what are review articles? These are like literature, the text, but in the text, say, if I talk about peak expiratory flow rate, if I consult a textbook, then I will get the definition of peak expiratory flow rate, its normal values, in what conditions it will increase, in what conditions it will decrease, and something like that. But in the review articles, if I search the review articles with the keyword peak expiratory flow rate, I will get the articles, the research that has been done taking peak expiratory flow rate as a tool. So I will come to know what kind of researches can be done. And in these review articles, you might find some gaps or the areas which may give you some promising ideas. And sometimes in the articles themselves, it is mentioned that the shortcomings of this study are so and so, so and so. So you can pick up those shortcomings and you can build a study, you can plan a study on those gaps. So identifying gaps, and then you select some of the promising ideas. It is always very good to talk to your colleagues and mentors, and of course, friendly colleagues, because when you go for search of a topic, it so happens that you become so stereotyped and your vision becomes so tubular that you sometimes do not are not able to see the hindrances that may occur, and a colleague of yours or a mentor of yours may point out immediately that this is something which should be considered and which should be taken care of. So it is always good to talk to your colleagues before finalizing your topic. And once you have come to a consensus, you should define the population. Now, population has to be defined not only in the terms of age, but also in the terms of numbers. As I told you, that you must consider that how much time do you have, and whether in that particular time will the number that you have decided is feasible to do or not. And finally, you must also define the outcomes. Now, outcomes of your study may be multiple, but there has to be a primary outcome and some other outcomes, also secondary outcomes. So the primary outcome has to be defined first, and this outcome has to be spelled out in the research question also. So finally, you have to formulate a research question. Okay. Let me explain all these points by giving you an example. So there was a student of mine, the first year student, who came to me, approached me for an STS project. STS is short-term studentship project, and it is initiated by ICMR to promote research skills in undergraduates. So he was a first year undergraduate, and he came to me and he told me, "Madam, I want to do a project under your guidance." I said, "Okay, so do you have any idea?" And he gave me those blank looks. Of course, because he doesn't have any idea. It should be me who should give him those ideas. So I told him, "Okay, which system do you like the most in physiology?" He said respiratory system. And I thought maybe it was because at that point of time respiratory system was going on. So I knew now that I was not having time, because this project was to be completed in just 3 months. So I was not having time, I was not having funds, and I was not having expertise, because this something which has to be done by, managed by a first year student who has no idea of research. So I thought spirometry could not be done, because that is something which cannot be, which transportation would be a problem. So I thought peak expiratory flow rate would be something which could be done, because PEFR, measuring the peak expiratory flow rate, does not require a technician. It does not require a big instrument or device. It is not at all costly. It costed just 250 rupees a device, and it is a non-invasive procedure, so people are not reluctant for using it. I mean, if you go for something like blood tests and all, you really have to convince people for that, and for that you have to have a phlebotomist with you. You must have vials. You must carry the vials, and then you should transport the samples to the lab, and you should wait for the tests to be run, and then it is your moral duty or the ethical duty. When you get the results, you have to share those results to the participants also. So all these things are saved, because with peak expiratory flow rate, with the device that you do it was a non-invasive procedure, and it will yield immediate results. So I thought, let us do something with peak expiratory flow rate. I told him that this is the keyword, and go. I told him, I gave him some ideas how to search the literature and go and find out something about this. And then he came to me, and we thought that yes, peak expiratory flow rate is something that detects airway narrowing. Airway narrowing is the hallmark of asthma. So can we asthma run in families? Can we detect asymptomatic narrowing through peak expiratory flow rate? something like these. And then when we thought, okay, let us do determination of airway narrowing through peak expiratory flow rate in students, in children coming from, we thought that we'll be doing it in children, because we will get all the children in once. We go to some school and we'll do it there. So we will get all our sample size, all the participants there and then. So we thought that would be easier for us. So we thought we'll be doing like this. And then it came the uh, time to define the population. Now, what school children, I mean, which age group should we go for? Now, we know that the peak expiratory flow rate determination, you have to blow very hard in a device. And a primary school child, a primary child will not be able to do it, because he will not be able to consider it seriously and might not put in all the effort to do this. So we thought that the population, we will go for the children of 8th and 9th standards. So we did our study on 13 to 15 years age group. We thought this would be our population. To define the outcomes, first we thought that let us go for looking for the differences in the peak expiratory flow rate in children coming from asthmatic families and children coming from non-asthmatic families. But then that would have increased the sample size, so we thought, okay, let us not do it. We will just be doing that, can we detect asymptomatic airway narrowing through peak expiratory flow rate. So with all these things, you can see we went from selecting an idea to spelling out the research question. So the research question, characteristics of research question are that it focuses on one single issue. It should be focusing on the primary outcome. It reflects the primary objective of the study. And the research question can be descriptive. That means it has no comparison group and no intervention, only observational, like the observational studies we just saw. And or it could be analytical, wherein there is an intervention and there is a comparison group. So these are the characteristics of a research question. And how is it spelled? I'll talk about another acronym. One was FINER that we talked about, and another is PICO. So PICO is again an acronym which is used to identify 4 primary components of not only a well-formulated research question, but also a title. P stands for patient, population, or problem. I stands for intervention or exposure. C for the comparison, and O for the outcome. In all the research questions, you will find a population and outcome. There may be a comparison group or may not be. An intervention also, there may be an intervention or there may not be an intervention. So the research questions that we formulated, I told you the story of my student. So the research question that we formulated were, can we detect airway narrowing in asymptomatic school children through PEFR measurement? Of course, since it is a question, it has to end with a question mark. Or another could be, will there be airway narrowing in asymptomatic school children with family history of asthma as compared to those without family history of asthma? Now, these are the research questions. When these research questions are transformed or they are written as a statement, they become hypotheses. So how can we form the hypothesis out of this first research question? Can we detect airway narrowing in asymptomatic school children? This, okay, let us talk about this. Detect airway narrowing is the O of this, and asymptomatic school children is the P. So P and O are there, P and O of PICO are there in this research question. And in this research question, you can see again, this is the O, outcome, airway narrowing. Asymptomatic school children is the P, that is PICO, P. And here we have a comparison group, so this is a C. So in the first question, we are having P and O, and in the second question, we are having P, C, and O. Now, as I told you, the research questions, if they are written in the form of statements, they become hypotheses. Now, the first question can be written in statement forms like airway narrowing can be detected in asymptomatic school children through peak expiratory flow rate measurement. And then the second question, will there be airway narrowing in asymptomatic school children with family history of asthma and not those without family history of asthma? Airway narrowing will be present in asymptomatic school children having family history of asthma as compared to those without family history of asthma. So these are turned into statements and they become now hypotheses. And these hypotheses are called alternative hypothesis or working hypothesis. So you will be testing these hypotheses. Hypothesis is something you are imagining and you are predicting. Okay, and you will now perform your study to test these hypotheses, whether these are correct or not. Now, for testing this hypothesis, you need one more hypothesis, and that is called null hypothesis. And null hypothesis means null hypothesis is exactly opposite to your working hypothesis. If your hypothesis, alternative hypothesis or working hypothesis says airway narrowing can be detected in asymptomatic school children through peak expiratory flow rate measurement, the null hypothesis will state airway narrowing cannot be detected in asymptomatic school children with PEFR measurement. Similarly, in the next question, airway narrowing will be present in asymptomatic school children. The null hypothesis will state airway narrowing will not be present in asymptomatic children coming from asthmatic families or non-asthmatic families. So this is null hypothesis, and the researcher would be very happy if he or she rejects this null hypothesis, because if he rejects the null hypothesis, his alternative hypothesis will be proved correct. So what is the use of having this null hypothesis? Null hypothesis actually gives us a starting point for a study. And it also provides a comparison point to see whether what we are finding in the study is different from the null result. Suppose you find a difference from null. Then you go to test whether this difference which has occurred is significant or not. So to start with, the null hypothesis is considered valid, and you have to reject it at the end of the study to prove that your working hypothesis is correct. So the null hypothesis states that there is no relationship between two phenomena under condition. It is opposite to the alternative or working hypothesis, and it is denoted by H0 or H0, and the alternative hypothesis is called H1 or HA. And a researcher either rejects or fails to reject the null hypothesis at the probability level of significance, because you have to, if you find some difference from the null, you have to find out whether the difference that I have found is significant or not. And you might have heard that p value, if it is less than 0.05, p stands for probability. So you have to determine a p-value, and then you have to decide after doing statistical tests that whether you are going to reject your null hypothesis or you are not going to reject it. And this all will be discussed again in the statistics. The session on statistics will be presented by Dr. Archana Gaur. Let us come to effective title. Now, what is the need of effective title of the study? Title, you can say, is an advertisement of your work, of your product. So if the advertisement is impressive, people will look to it, people will read your article, and when they read it, they will cite it, and the more they cite, the more effective or more authentic your study becomes. So the effective title should indicate accurately the subject and scope of the study. And as I told you, effective title must also contain PICO, PICO of your study. should indicate accurately the subject and scope. It should be interesting. It should stimulate the interest of readers, peer reviewers, and editors. Now, interesting means interesting in the form, in the limited purview. That means you cannot use very fancy titles because you are talking about biomedical research. So, first thing that first when you submit your manuscript, the first encounter is with the editors. If the editor found it interesting, if the editor finds it interesting, then only they will send the study further for peer review. And then reviewers, when they review it, if the readers find it interesting, they will read, and they will then, there are high chances of your article being cited. Now, an effective title must include all the keywords, because you know that you will learn that keywords are required, I told you, for retrieval of the article. So if you are including the keywords of your study in your title, there are high chances that your study is retrieved, and more it is retrieved, more it can be read and cited. The effective title must suggest a relationship between variables which will support the major hypothesis. So the primary outcome has to be mentioned, not the secondary outcomes, because secondary outcomes may be many and you cannot include all the outcomes in your title, which will make it very, very big or large. So titles are usually in the form of a phrase, sometimes in the form of a question. But it can be in the form of question, but it should not be, it should also, mostly it should be in the form of a phrase. The titles should not include the words like study of, analysis of, or similar kind of constructions. It may be permissible when you are giving the title to a thesis, but for a manuscript which you are submitting for a journal, these words should be avoided. If I told you in the pyramid, there were some studies which were lying in the base of the pyramid, and some studies which were lying at the higher levels of the pyramid. Say, for example, randomized controlled trials. So if you are doing randomized controlled trials, you may mention it in the title itself. But if you are doing an observational study or cross-sectional study, those are the studies which are very, very commonly done, so that may not be included. It is good not to include them. You must avoid exclamation mark. And as I told you, sometimes question mark is permissible, but exclamation mark should not be given in the title. You must avoid abbreviations and jargons until and unless the abbreviations are very, very common. Say, for example, if you're using the word ECG, ECG is very common, so that may be used, but as far as possible, avoid abbreviations in the title. Avoid giving geographical information. If I write peak expiratory flow rate determination in the school-going students of Jodhpur district, a person who is residing in at higher, in the hill stations might not be interested in doing so. But if I do not give it, so he may read my article and he may come to the consensus whether he finds it useful or not, or something like that. So as long as possible, you should avoid giving geographical information. Let the reader himself decide whether the article is of his relevance or not. The title has to be succinct, simplified, limited to 10 to 15 words with correct grammar and capitalization. This is an example of a title, and excellent titles make stellar first impressions. So as they say, first impression is the last impression. I would not say first impression is the last impression, but first impression is a very important impression. That I do believe. So an excellent title, if it is given, then as I told you, it will not only, it will go from the editor to the peer reviewers to the readers and finally cited. The journal titles impact their citation rates. This also I have been telling you again and again that the titles, the article journals have got a great impact in their citation rates. So the story that I told you, again coming back to that story. So we planned the study and the title given to this was Peak Expiratory Flow Rate, a useful tool for early detection of airway obstruction in school children. So you can see that school children is the population. You can see that a useful tool for early detection of airway obstruction is again the outcome that we determine. You see peak expiratory flow rate. We have not written PEFR, which is a fairly common abbreviation, but still we have used it in full form. And this is how this is what we have done. This was the study that we published. Okay. And now when we publish this study, okay, another thing is that we have not used the word asthma here. We have used only the word airway obstruction because asthma can only be confirmed with spirometric findings. And we have not done spirometry in this case. So we have not used the term asthma. But then while doing this, one thing was there that we knew the limitations of this study. One was that we were having a small sample size, and then we wanted to compare the findings in two different groups, those children coming from asthmatic families and coming from non-asthmatic families. But we were not able to do it because we were having time crunch, and so we had to reduce the sample size. So we didn't do that also, and we didn't do spirometry. That was not in our that we didn't thought of that. So these were the limitations, or these were the lacuna, and on this we built another study in which we took a higher sample, larger sample size. We did peak expiratory flow rate of those children, school-going children, asymptomatic school-going children, and then in those children in whom we found that the peak expiratory flow rate is less, or we found that early obstruction, we confirmed those findings with spirometry. And then, and in these cases, we not only compared the groups coming from asthmatic and non-asthmatic families, but we also compared the groups coming from higher socioeconomic group and lower socioeconomic group. So those were the secondary outcomes. And therefore, the next study that we planned over this is this. This was recently published in March 2020. The title is Screening Asymptomatic School Children for Early Asthma by Determining Airway Narrowing through Peak Expiratory Flow Rate Measurement. Now you can see that how the gaps were used to build up another study. Okay, and in this study, in the title, again, you can see that peak expiratory flow rate is written in full, no abbreviation is being used. In this, we have used the word asthma because in this, we have confirmed asthma. So we are confirming asthma by asymptomatic children. Now this study has also got a limitation that we have done spirometry only in those children in whom we found that airway narrowing is there by peak expiratory flow rate. We can form another study in which we can do simultaneously do peak expiratory flow rate as well as spirometry to confirm the diagnosis. So that this is how you can build a study and another study over it, and likewise. So this is something about the title. Now let us see some titles which are not up to the mark. Say this one, an observational study to compare pulmonary function tests of rural with urban. Now, an observational study, I told you observational studies do not, they do not generate a good level of evidence. So this is not something to boast about. If you are doing some randomized control trial, you must do that. but not for this. So an observational study should not be used. To compare pulmonary function tests of rural with urban. What? Rural with urban adults, rural with urban children. What? You should define the population properly. So a correct title would be Comparison of Pulmonary Function Tests in Rural and Urban Adults. Now, another example that I want to give you is this. An observational study to evaluate mental stress through perceived stress scale and heart rate variability before and after treatment in patients of major depression diagnosed with Hamilton Depression Rating Scale of age group 20 to 40 years and correlation of HRV with perceived stress score. Now this is too big a title, not impressive at all. So start cutting things, start limiting it, trimming it. So an observational study should not be used. To evaluate mental stress through perceived stress scale. If you are evaluating mental stress, there has to be some tool for it. This is not necessarily be, this should not be written here. So this should be omitted. Heart rate variability before and after treatment of major depression, again diagnosed with Hamilton Depression Rating Scale. If you are taking patients of major depression, those are diagnosed patients, and there has to be some tool for measuring, for diagnosing those people as having major depression. So you don't have to mention that in title. Everything this goes into the material and methods, where you can be as elaborate as possible, but not in the title. So again, before and after treatment, this should also not be given. You not need there is no necessity to write the age group of the patients or the population in the title. And then next is correlation of HRV. So correlation of HRV with perceived stress score. This is the secondary outcome. Again, the secondary outcome should not be there. So this title becomes to evaluate mental stress and heart rate variability in patients of newly diagnosed major depression. So this is a succinct title which is good enough for publication, and it has all the necessary requirement. So the take-home messages for this are only two acronyms I want you to remember. One is FINER for research idea and TICO for research title. Thank you so much.